Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 94 for the National Land Realty Podcast, where we discuss all things land. Our goal here is to inform, educate, and entertain those of you who own land or are interested in the buying and selling of land throughout the United States. My name is Matt Christian, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty. I'll be your host again, 94 episodes in for this episode. Now, today, spring turkey season is closing. We're close to the end here, and that makes today's conversation that much more important. We're talking with Director of Business Operations and Partnerships for Turkeys for Tomorrow, Jason Lupardus. Jason has been traveling around the country taking stock of turkey populations and harvest reports, and what he has to say could potentially affect your turkey hunting for years to come. This episode is worth your time. Now sit back and enjoy. Board. And I'm sitting here with Jason Lupardus with Turkeys for Tomorrow. And we're at the end of the season, really, right? I mean, we got days when it comes down to it, depending on where you are, right? But you're out there, out and about. We were just talking beforehand, and not only are you chasing turkeys, but you're chasing mule deer.
Oh man, don't remind me. Come on now.
Which
I did get a mule deer tag this year.
There we go. And for those listening, it had not hunting with a rifle, but hunting with a truck, which is never good for travel. We were just comparing notes here, Jason and I, that I tagged a giant metal pole on a fishing trip, and he had a run-in with a mule deer with his truck. So, but you're running around all over the country right now, and working with turkeys, working with associations, and it's a very hot topic right now because we're in season and everybody's thinking about turkeys. So, first question to you is, what are we seeing nationwide when it comes down to turkey numbers? And what people are noticing and what you were hearing, because you are obviously have your finger on the pulse of populations right now.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Number one, thanks for having me on again. Love chatting with you guys. Y'all are great partners, and great to help spread the good word about turkeys and what's going on. So thank you again. But yeah, I just got back from the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agency Turkey Committee meeting. It was held in Oklahoma this year.
Is that how they write it out? Is that one long?
Dude, it's terrible. It's an acronym, and people look at it and go, "What does that mean?"
That is a paragraph.
It is. It's just like, come on, agencies, y'all should be able to like square it down, like Western Turkey Meeting. That might be better or something. I don't know. But yeah, I've said the same thing, and everyone's like, "Hey, you going to Waffle?" And they're like waffles.
Waffle?
Did you say waffles? And I'm like, "No, baby, we're not going to eat waffles. We're going to try to eat turkeys and wild ones out west." And so yeah, that's what it is, the Waffle meeting. But it was a very good meeting. The interesting thing, man, just coming back from there, Oklahoma is seeing some pretty serious issues, and I pushed a slide out a couple of weeks ago when I was there, and it was pretty doggone alarming. But they're showing some nest success that was below that 30% threshold. And so in one part of the state, they had done a study this past year, and they had 6% nest success for turkeys. So what does that mean? That means there's a big issue with turkey population dynamics, and usually nest success comes down to either weather conditions suck. Okay, you could have drought, rain, you name it. In this particular case, it wasn't weather dependent. What they did find is that predators and birds being bumped off nests for multiple reasons, even in cattle country, was causing some issues. I think over 50% of the nest failures was due to predators alone, which is scary. In another part of the state where they ran this same testing, they basically have GPS birds where they're tracking where they are, and then they're basically getting live cameras put on them to kind of see when they're going to hatch out, et cetera. But they also found in that situation, it was under 15% nest success. Once again, you're not at the threshold to grow a population. That shows a declining population. which just scares me, man. It scares people in the turkey profession. Some of this we may think is cyclical. We do know birds can renest, but on average, when birds renest, their nest success rate is only about 30%. Okay. So I've said 30% twice. 30% is kind of a magic number. In the overall population, if we're hitting at least 30%, we're probably going to be okay. We'd like to see 50% or better. Okay. Nest success. Nest success just means the hen's on the nest. She's cranking out eggs and she's not getting predated. She's not dying in the process, nor are the eggs getting scarfed away by some kind of predator or scavenger. Okay?
I was going to say, because this is the success of the nest being viable and hatching birds. That's not even the birds making it to adulthood.
That's it, brother. And so there's two big things to talk about here, and that's the one big one is nest success is first, right? We got to get that hen to survive with that clutch of eggs and crank those poults out. And then usually the first 2 weeks after that poult is hatched out is the most critical time. That's when most of your poults die because they can't fly yet. They're trying to kind of work those wings. They're trying to strengthen up. And mama's trying to show them how to get up on a tree. And so after about 2 weeks, these birds can start flying and basically get off the ground at night. Nighttime is a really bad time for birds. Number one, there's a lot of birds on the ground. They put a lot of scent down. And so anything with a nose is tracking birds down. They're not specifically looking for them, but as these predators are hitting their home ranges, they smell them out. And with moisture, moisture holds scent. For folks out there that use bird dogs, you don't like to hunt on days when it's really dry because you know what? There's no scent out there. But when there's a little bit of moisture in the morning, man, your dogs work beautifully. They're on point and things are great. Same things go for turkey. So predators really sniff them out well. And even though hens can fight back some predators pretty well, but they can't fight them all back. And so there's been a lot of things, shaking out on media. I shared something the other day on a fox running in on a nesting hen, and just a gray fox killed her in about 30 seconds. And so didn't really hit the clutch of eggs, but just killed the hen. And I'm sure something will scavenge the eggs, but the eggs won't be viable after the hen's gone. So there's just a lot of issues, but we're seeing some marked decline in some areas, and we know that predators are just a part of the mix. And some of it is poor habitat, honestly. And so if you have quality habitat in place, your predation should go down. And so there's a whole slew of predators that are targeting turkeys, much as many other species, but quality habitat is kind of the foundation. And then there's next level things you can do to really help bump the bird number. So what are we seeing on a national scale? I mean, it is across the board. We probably have more decline than we do growth. In some states, the far western states, we saw Washington, Oregon, maybe California. Some of those states are in a stable mode right now, which is good. It's fantastic. We see states like Texas, Oklahoma, even had some concerns in Wyoming, especially in the Black Hills with too much pressure. And they're actually seeing twice as many hunters there as non-residents than they do residents. And that's never happened. And so some of these places are getting hit with too much pressure, maybe harvest, which could be an issue. Down here in the deep South, we're seeing some numbers not as good. Here in Kentucky, we just had another really great harvest year. But it also followed up a few years ago when we had a big cicada hatch. And so I think that has something to do with those numbers being much higher. And then we had a very, very, very warm winter, which helps with overwinter survival. And so when you start putting some of these things together, it can really help populations. And then other things can really help push them downward. So a ton of things going on. There's a ton of regulation changes and thoughts. It's all over the board. We have another big meeting coming up right around the corner. It's the Southeastern Wild Turkey Working Group meeting for all the Southeastern states. It's going to be in Virginia next month in June. And so when that thing rolls out, it's basically all the state agencies are coming together, nonprofits like Turkeys for Tomorrow, and additionally others in the research arena. They all come, share some knowledge together, and we really kind of come away with like a strategy or approach of things to do the next year. So a lot shaking in the turkey arena right now.
You brought up predators there, and is there and it's always going to be a wide range given the area, given the geography, but are there any kind of like primary culprits that you're looking at as far as like the growth of this one species, or is it just in general? And what would you associate that with as far as their impact with turkeys? Is it the protective measures that have been put on predators over the years, or is it habitat? What kind of speaks to that?
Man, this is a big old onion, and we'll dissect a little bit of it,
Let's
man.
peel
Let me
onion
peel
here.
a layer back real quick. So number one, there are predators that really focus on nesting birds because of scent, etc., and then also the eggs. And so it's pretty cool. Dr. Brett Collier at LSU has a lot of different pictures, videos of even hens sitting on a nest, and they've had a fox come in and pulling out eggs underneath the hen. I mean, literally, and the fox never attacked the hen, which is crazy because usually that's what would happen. Foxes and bobcats are the most efficient bird predators in general out there. Okay. Coyotes will pick off some as well, but they're not really as honed in on birds as is a bobcat or a fox. And so those are key. But when they're sitting on the nest, even a rat snake, we've seen that rat snakes are one of the biggest culprits for going in and eating eggs. And there's even videos out there where these rat snakes have snuck in underneath the hen and they're just sucking eggs one after another. And the hen just sits there trying to keep the rest of them together. Raccoons tend to come in and scavenge. We've got videos of multiple raccoons coming in and really attacking and coming day after day and just continuing to pluck eggs. Oftentimes, raccoons will come in after the fact. Maybe a bird gets bumped off her nest. Okay. Hens, for whatever reason, if they feel that predator threat is high, and if they might get bumped a couple of times off their nest, they may completely leave it, disband it. And so then you have other, what I'd say, scavengers come in and start pulling eggs. We've seen crows come in. Hen leaves the nest, a crow sees from visibility from above, comes down and hits the nest, which is something else. We've got a lot of pictures of multiple mammal species carrying eggs off from a nest as they find it. I mean, you and I don't know about you, man, but I eat eggs all the time. I mean, almost every day. And so if I come across some juicy eggs, man, I was some predator and go, man, these are big. I may have to take one or two. And so it's just one of those things. And so I think a lot of them get picked off. But when these hens are on this nest for a good month, they're putting a lot of scent down. So as these predators are coming by and working areas, they're picking them up with their nose. They target them. A lot of times they kill the hen. That's when most of our hens die, is on the nest. So there's really collectively about a 45-day window where we see the highest mortality of turkeys in general. Okay, so you got a hen that's nesting, and then she's dumping out poults up to the first 2 weeks, and she's staying with them on the ground until they can fly. And so that 45 to 60-day window, okay, roughly, is the most critical time for turkeys throughout the year. And we're in it right now. Most everywhere that you go across the nation, hens have starting putting nests down as soon as March. And we're seeing, poults being cranked out now. And then as you move further north, further into the Northwest, it's a little bit later. But you see nests that are active right now and poults that are already on the ground. We've got a lot of videos and pictures over the last 3 weeks of poults hitting the ground across the country.
And so you mentioned that good habitat will drive down some of the predator pressure. Is that because more like I will call it poor habitat? Is that because it puts them in the desperation mode? They're more likely to hit turkey because there's not as many options, or what's sort of what constitutes a good habitat and how that affects predators?
Sure, man. So I look at like quality habitat for turkeys in general. It's not a big mowed out area. A lot of people go, man, I love my mowed field. And that's where turkeys like to go because they'll strut there. And I'm like, yeah, but that's what kills turkeys too. And so when turkeys are in the wide open and they have visibility where something can see them from a long distance, it makes them most vulnerable for mammalian predators and especially aerial predators. We know that in some places that 30% of mortality of adult and juvenile turkeys, okay, the poults that are growing up, are picked off by avian predators, hawks and owls, basically. Owls are really bad on birds on the roost at night.
I was
Not
going to
many
say,
people know
you
this.
mentioned the nighttime thing, and that would be
It's
exactly it.
it's terrible. So on the ground, the ideal situation, I used to do this with a hen to go. If a hen is on the ground moving through vegetation, then when she stands up and periscopes real high and she can see over the vegetation, that's usually ideal understory vegetation because they can creep down and get below and hide in the veg. Some birds will even sit down as an aerial swoop. I'll give you an example. When I was in Oklahoma, I got to turkey hunt for a couple of days for Rios. Um, and literally, we had two different predators target us that day. We're on the edge of a pasture, and this coyote heard us call and come run across the pasture, hit the wood line with us, and was sneaking up the fence line. We had 7 jakes come in, and we're videoing this. I'm like, as this dude gets a little closer, he's about to, he's about to taste it. He's about to have his day in heaven, and I'm gonna give it to him a little early. But we have this predator coming in. He ended up scenting us, and that's the only reason why he survived that day. But he's stalking these jakes. Within about 10 minutes, the jakes start coming back in. We're calling, trying to get them into the wood line, and we had a hawk come down and swoop and barely miss one. Okay, we're sitting one afternoon and we saw 2 different predators use 2 different methodologies to try to take out these birds. And so it's very clear to me, and I see it every year, but when you experience it firsthand, you understand that these predators are really efficient at what they do and they're very effective. But when they're in that wide open area, gosh, they're so susceptible to all these predators. So the ideal habitat, if there's this sea of understory where they can hide, get away underneath things, all of a sudden the likelihood of birds being picked off goes down dramatically. Does it mean that they still won't get picked off? No, not at all. But it increases their odds of survival. So having a great sea of understory habitat, not just saying, hey, I'm going to create 5 acres of brood range. It's like, no, you need to manage your whole property correctly. Because if you do that, you're helping not only wild turkeys, but a bunch of other species. And you're really deterring predators because predators have to use their eyes, nose, their senses to hone in on the birds that we love. And if we can put them in protection and not go out there and go, man, I just want to see them. I think I'm going to do something to get to see them. So at this time of year, man, we're in May and June right now. And something we've been promoting and we've seen several others do the same is don't go out and recreational mow. And some people would go, man, what are you talking about recreational mowing? Oh, you know who you are. You the guy that's out there like, man, my weeds are getting high and I got to mow this down. Just don't do it. Just wait. Just wait. Because right now these hens are still in their nests. So you're likely going to run over a hen or a nest, kill her and or the poults. Or if the poults have hatched, these poults, their basically survival mechanism is when harm comes around, they sit down and sit tight. And so they get chewed up by the mower as well until they can fly. And so if people would just wait and get through most of June and go, you know what, get on that mower in July, mow if you got to mow. I would much rather you do it then than right now in May and June. With folks that have pastures and they're growing grass or hay, completely understandable. Man's got to make a living, and I'm never going to push a farmer back and go, don't do it. But just be smart about it and think about how you can divvy that up and maximize some habitat and be looking out for the birds that we really appreciate and love right now.
Well, and what you just spoke to is an actionable item that any landowner can do to help encourage turkey populations in their area. And it's not every day that someone gets asked not to work, right? So
That's right.
Sit back, have a sweet tea, watch the sunset.
Absolutely, man.
Don't worry about chopping the grass down. That's something.
It's simple. Hey, another place I've talked to so many landowners about is like, you get on your property and maybe you own 100 acres and you got like an access road going through it, right? And most everyone's like, man, I got to keep the edges really clean and all this jazz. Well, you can, but do it on a 2-year rotation. And people are like, well, what do you mean? Like, well, don't mow it every year, or pick one side of the road, your access road, to mow or clean up annually, right? But don't do it right now. Just wait till late summer, do it, and then leave one in structure. And what you will see is you will actually make multiple wildlife species feel comfortable coming out to the road edge because there's cover there. And so it's a real simple technique. And all it takes is just a little forethought. Go, you know what? I'm not going to mow it all down this year. Maybe I'll wait a year. And if you do it on a 2-year window, you're going to keep all your woody debris down and very manageable. If you wait to year 3 or later, that's when it gets really nasty. And then the cost to manage things goes through the roof. But if you do it on a 2-year cycle, you're going to be in good shape. And if you alternate sides of the road, man, you maximize your habitat all the way up to the road edge. And if you're one of them lazy guys or gals, like, man, I'm just going to sit on my ORVs. It's cold. I want to stay warm and watch critters. It's a great place to sit on the road, and critters will come right to the road edge. It's pretty simple.
So, does that increase your odds with turkeys, utilizing rocks for digestion if you have cover on the road edge?
Grit, man. Absolutely. Yep. So they're going to come in and get that grit. And literally, they can get right back into cover really quickly. So if a hog or something,
they got a good source right there for everything. And sometimes there's a canal beside the road too. Like you got the whole mix right there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you mentioned grit, because grit's it's one of those topics that not a lot of people talk about with turkeys or gallinaceous birds in general, but they got to have that to basically break everything down right in their crop. So they pick up grit, but they also do a ton of dusting to help with mites and other ectoparasites. And so I tell some folks, I'm like, it's okay to, hair a little spot, maybe a little strip occasionally on the edge of a field, but keep a little bare dirt. And it's just for dusting. And what you'll see is once these birds have established dust sites, they'll come back year to year. But if you have it adjacent to some good cover, it's going to keep them protected. They go in, dust, get some grit, they back at it. You're good. Put a camera on it, watch it if you really got to see them. So yeah.
And we have that with quail here, like right out of my backyard. Right, there's a bunch of sagebrush, and there's a huge quail population, and they've burrowed under this sagebrush. So there's not even grass under there. Like they've created this whole network, and they have like quail tunnels, and they use it.
Yeah.
It's exactly what they're doing is they're in there dusting. They sit there and roll around. Like it looks like a dog just having the time of its life, right? Like, with the legs up in the air kind of thing. And they sit there and do that. And like they've established, it looks like tunnels under this thing, but it's the same kind of principle, right? They're all birds.
Absolutely.
So when you talked about coyotes specifically, have you seen an increase in those or have you heard anything about that? And the only reason I ask is that just rumor network with agriculture is I've heard of large population bursts in coyotes here out west. I didn't know if that's been a case, particularly like you talked about Oklahoma, if that's a thing.
Yeah, I tell you, when I hunted 2 days and then maybe another morning trying to help someone else get on a bird in Oklahoma, I saw 7 different coyotes. Like when we were calling, coyotes responded. And I think that landscape, because they're the apex predator and they know how to work that. And it's big, wide open spaces, so you can catch those coyotes from a longer distance. But at nighttime, we could hear the family groups yipping and howling. Coyotes are not really native to the eastern United States. They have migrated and really immigrated into this area over time because our larger apex predators that were here, we had gray wolves all the way down through Appalachia, basically. And then in the coastal plain of the United States was originally the red wolf home range. And so coyotes were not here. They wouldn't have made it. And so what we've seen over time is these coyotes have come in and they've really established what I call our family groups. I have personally watched, I'm a wildlife biologist, and I hate to tell some of these stories because it goes against everything I learned, was told not to talk about. But here's some facts. When you see it, you experience it, you just can't change that. And what we're hearing from what I'd call all of our citizen science turkey hunters out there, very similar instances is where these family groups, they come together and they really target a critter. And I've watched a family group one time of 5 coyotes target some deer, and they were working deer to try to get on this. It was a crippled deer, and it was mind blowing. I've never seen anything like it, but it was very well orchestrated. I was here with my daughter a few years ago. We're turkey hunting here in Kentucky, and we had a decoy out in the afternoon trying to get a bird to come down this hill, and she's like, "What's that, Dad?" And I said, "Wow, that's a coyote." And next thing you know, I saw two different coyotes working down through some broom sedge, trying to get down the decoys. Now they end up smelling us because it was a hot afternoon in Kentucky, and you can smell me a mile away, right? But they got really lucky because of their nose. But they saw the decoys, they heard our sounds, and they were targeting us from the sound. And so it's pretty interesting. I think coyotes have adapted to how they can relate, move, and do what they do. And some years ago, I got a lifetime of trapping behind me, and I remember going to this meeting with the trappers. I went to a fur harvesting like school, right, to learn some advanced techniques in trapping. 2 weeks with Purdue University in Indiana. It's pretty interesting. But one of the researchers that come in and spoke to us talked about where one of the highest densities of coyote populations was in the U.S. And it blew me away at the time. And it was a place I'd have never thought. And I'm thinking like, oh, it must be some kind of rural place, whatever. But he mentioned two places. One out west, which blew me away, was Los Angeles. The other one was Chicago.
I was gonna jump on and see if it was New York.
Yeah, and it threw me off. I'm like, what? And so they had radio tagged coyotes, and they basically they would be like a half-acre green area. And I still remember this one picture. It was behind a school. Okay, kids are playing. They're like, that's where one of the den sites are. These coyotes come out, and they're basically scavenging rodents. Okay, on roadsides at night. They're going and picking up mice, rats, you name it, occasional little fifi or something. But that's their target. Insects, you name it. But these coyote populations, they said it's some of the highest documented populations they've ever seen in suburban areas. And I was like, whoa. So these critters have adapted to living with us and know how to get around. So knowing that they can live in your backyard. I mean, gosh, man, I live in a neighborhood and I got a trail camera out, and I pick up those dudes occasionally in my backyard too, and it surprises me. This is not a place I would expect to see them, but they're so adaptive, and I think they've adapted to targeting a lot of species like turkeys because it's an easy meal.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to jump into my documentary mode. I just watched one on they call them coy wolves. Is that?
Yep.
Yeah, back east, that's been a thing where they've crossbred with wolves and coyotes, and it's like kind of an apex predator that's not afraid of urban areas, but still sneaky and a little bigger, and it kind of to your point, like they're kind of settling down in urban areas, which is really shocking. And then a lot of times you hear of coyotes as like a solitary kind of thing, right, where they kind of go out solitary, but the pack hunting mechanism that a lot of people have seen in it. I don't know if it's a growing thing or if it's just a trend cycle or whatever, but it's definitely been observed where it's like they're surrounding and coordinating and that kind of thing to where it's been really interesting over the last little bit of time. And I'm sure it doesn't help turkeys at all.
No, it does not.
So are there, are there population boosts in, say, everything from bobcats to raccoons to foxes to coyotes to hawks and eagles and owls? Is that kind of what we're seeing? Is that there are kind of increases in those populations?
We are, and so this is it's so complicated, man, to talk about.
It's a little controversial. It's a little complicated.
It is, man. Yeah. It's just like, okay, man, it makes my head hurt some days. Maybe that's why I don't have any hair anymore. But I mean, here's the thing. I mean, yes, what we're seeing is because us, right, we're in a lot of places that we used to not be in. So we have a lot more fragmentation. We have a lot more edge. Okay. And so edge species tend to do really well in a lot of these predators. They work edges because that's where they find the highest diversity of food and items. It's great for white-tailed deer. We have more white-tailed deer than we ever have now because we're so fragmented. Deer tend to thrive in this environment. Well, turkeys are coming in these environments and they're getting picked off more readily because predator numbers are higher. the trapping that used to be done and fur harvest is just not there anymore. And so we have these issues. And what we're seeing, and I'm going to mention cicadas for a minute because, man, this is a hot cicada
Say
year.
this is the
And
year, huh?
this is the year of cicadas. And so there's a lot of pictures coming out of media of turkey crops just loaded full of cicadas, a lot of great food. But what's more important than them eating cicadas and gorging themselves is that there's predator prey dynamic shifts. Okay. And so that coyote that may be going out in search mode has now got all these big morsels in front of him. And if you've ever watched coyotes in the wild, they pick up a lot of bugs. They'll pick up grasshoppers, crickets, you name it as well. And so they start gorging on cicadas. So now they're not having to go out and go in search mode because they're filling up quick. Bobcats are the same. Hawks are the same. Raccoons are the same. So a lot of these predators that we've talked about that, love to eat turkeys, love to eat eggs, love to eat poults. Now they have a new food source. You know what happens? They gorge on this new food source. And now what we see, and this has been documented in a lot of states over time, is that turkey numbers actually increase. The poult to hen ratios actually increase dramatically on these cicada years. And so this natural phenomenon that we see, we put together an article back in March to kind of highlight every county this is going to occur in. It's really cool. Go to our website, check it out. You can look in, if you're in a state, in a county, you can tell. And right now, let me tell you, if you're one of those states or counties, you're hearing them. I have so many people reaching out and going, man, they're here. It's loud, but it's really good for turkeys. And so what we see is usually 2 years after such an event, we have very high turkey harvest with hunters because basically survival's higher. And then most of your harvest in the spring is 2-year-old birds. And so 2 years from now, we'll see that. And then in the year 3, because we had such a population boost, we usually see a nice trickle effect. So, man, I'm excited about the cicada event, but it goes to show that when Mother Nature has a finger into predator-prey dynamics and you shift predators away, your turkey numbers go up. And so my philosophy is the same thing. Like, well, if we could get rid of a few extra predators, our turkey numbers should go up, right? I mean, it's well demonstrated. So
And what you just spoke to is exactly the opposite of where I was thinking you were headed. You were talking about the cicada hatchet. I'm thinking of like, oh, food. Like the turkeys are able to get a food source, but it's also food as in, the predators are eating this lower, like, if you're looking at the chain of food dynamics, right? You got top chain of where the predators are, and then like turkeys are probably like your mid-range. You got this low-hanging fruit down there of like slow cicadas that these predators can get to. The fact that they're distracted with other food, like I wouldn't have thought about it that way in terms of dynamics, but it makes total sense.
Yeah, man, it'd be like me saying, "Hey, brother, man, come on over, man. I'm cooking out tonight. I'm cooking for you. I got you." But I do that every night, and you're like, "Man, this is good, man. Man, Jason's taking care of me." And
I'm
so
not
I'm like,
grocery
"Well,
shopping anymore."
I mean, I don't have to grocery shop, man. I go home and I was good, and I think about it like that. Like all of a sudden, there's these little protein nuggets everywhere, and it's funny, man. Even people are known to take the wings off, put them in the frying pan, cook them up too, right? Like crickets. I mean, there's all this cicada kind of awareness and use of this big bug. Okay. So it's pretty cool right now what's going on. And some of these hatches are they're coming on once I think ground temps are around 55, 57 degrees, something like that. I might be a little bit off. They start emerging. So I'm hearing about a lot emerging deep in the deep south. And as we move up through the Midwest, you'll see much, much more of that. And in some cases, we're having two different, as they call them, species or life cycles are hatching at the same time. First time since I think Thomas Jefferson was around. So it's a pretty big event.
I was going to say, if you want to lose yourself in the downward spiral of the internet for a couple minutes, you got to look up cicada sculptures.
What?
Because there's so many shucks of cicadas everywhere There's a select few,
Uh,
I'm gonna say I'm gonna say pioneering individuals who have started gathering the discarded exoskeletons of the cicadas and started making footprints out of these things.
oh my goodness.
I'm not gonna lie, they're kind of awesome, but it's like, where did that thought come from?
Yeah. And how do you have time to do that?
And how do you have
Which is great. This is great for some people. I wish I could say the same, but I can't.
there's of all the I could think of worse hobbies.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
But it's
So
definitely
yeah,
different. It's definitely different.
cicadas are something else. But yeah, man, this goes back to the whole predator thing, and so it really helps prove a lot of what Turkeys for Tomorrow has been talking about. Is that we do firmly believe that adjusting some predator numbers. The predator numbers are artificially higher. A lot of this is because some of these predators, such as our aerial predators, have been protected for a long time to bring their numbers back. And I'll be honest with you, I'd say our raptor numbers are probably at an all-time high. And in the South, as these raptors migrate south for winter, the South gets really hit hard because you got a lot more predators that are encompassing the landscape because of migration. So I think when you start layering in all these issues with especially turkey decline that we're seeing, you can probably go, this might be additive to it. This might be additive to it. And so what we've seen, at least from a very anecdotal standpoint, it's not 100% proven. It's been proven with other species. But what we're seeing anecdotally is people talking about just getting into a trapping routine, like, hey, man, I'm getting back into it. I'm going to trap my property. And if you can put about 2.5 weeks in, which seems like a lot, but doing it right before nest initiation, it can be very beneficial because it takes time for these predators to come back in, to immigrate back in. But if we start doing that at a scale, let's say we're in a cooperative where you and all your neighbors are like, you know what, we're going to work together and try to help. Now, at a scale, it's going to take longer for predators to immigrate back in. You might be able to boost that population enough to where you start seeing what I call intrinsic growth. We saw intrinsic growth back during the days of reintroduction. And it wasn't because, hey, we just put a new species and it's going to boom. It's because the timing of that was at the same time that predator numbers and trapping was at it. Predator trapping was at its highest. Okay. Fur harvest was a very important thing because there's a lot of revenue tied to it. So we had states that were aggressively trapping most of your mesopredators. Your raptor numbers were trying to come back. There was something called DDT back in the day and many things that was causing some issues. So what we saw is a lot of predator numbers were really low. And so our turkey population exploded overnight. And so we're seeing average hen to poult ratios of survival or recruiting into the population of a 1-7 or 1-8. Where is that today? If we're at a stable population today, that's a 1-2 ratio. Growth is a 1/2, like a 1-3. In some states, we're seeing like that ratio being just below a 1-2. So we're still showing a marked decline, which scares me. So if we could get landowners together on a cooperative, because we know a wild turkey covers a lot of ground, okay? Average home ranges, and we're even seeing some new data of birds, when they disperse going 6, 8, 10 miles away. It's crazy. We got a lot of banding data going on right now. Some stuff we're even helping fund where we're seeing birds that got banded and they're 8, 10 miles away, and people are thinking like, whoa, we've never seen that before. They're supposed to be in this 1 to 4 square mile home range, right? Anywhere from about 640 acres to about 2,500 acres, where we're seeing some of these birds expanding beyond that, like Western birds. And so there's a lot of new knowledge coming to the table going, whoa, okay, these birds are covering a lot of ground. How are we going to better manage that? Because they may not only be on my 20 acres, but they may be on the next 50 acres, 100 acres, 200 acres, 500 acres. And so if we're not all working together to manage for the species, we could actually have some detrimental pushes toward the bird.
And
And so this is inclusive of management of habitat, not
yeah.
trapping, and or maybe over harvest in an area.
So, and you just spoke to something about the population densities of predator to prey, that, and I think we've seen a lot of that, especially over the last 20 years, where you have an animal that has not been preyed upon as much because the predators have been gone, declined, managed, however you want to say it. And because I started thinking immediately of wolves and elk out west here, and it's I am not even going to tiptoe into the political spectrum of this whole thing because it's a
That's a
nightmare.
hot one. Yeah.
Oh man, you'd even saying the word, right? But fundamentally, what you have is a population that is has not had to worry as much about predators, so their sort of like evolutionary reactions are not honed in. And then you have a predator that rapidly expands in that area, and so like you just have dumb food at that time.
Absolutely.
They haven't had enough time to adapt properly to the pressure that they have, and so you have a decline. And then you have in the other side of that, since you have kind of, I'm going to say dumb food as a way to just, I'm not going to use scientific terms here today, but you know,
that's okay. We're good with that.
I'm a marketer. I'm not supposed to be smart, right? So, you know, when you have that, you have a population of predators that rapidly increases, and the equilibrium takes time, but we can help it along, if I'm hearing you right, by trying to help manage in a certain geography.
Absolutely. And here's the other thing. So, if there's a species that we want to see more of, because we're part of this system, and I'll be honest with you, if we can talk about the financials of what drives hunting licenses, and the bread and butter across the nation, at least here in the eastern U.S., especially eastern U.S., is deer and turkey, and then everything else trickles behind. And so, it's a tremendous amount of people that want to deer and turkey hunt, and if our turkey numbers are not at a level that we are happy with, why would we not want to take some proactive measures to get it back? It's just like with wolves and elk. What we've seen out west is elk densities are dropping pretty quickly. And so wolf numbers are growing rather rapidly. And so we're now in many states where used to have a lot of hunters, especially some of us Easterners want to go west to hunt elk because we just don't have the elk here in the east like we used to. But those numbers are getting to where they're having to really make some really long term thoughts on how are we going to manage this elk herd, because now we don't have the numbers to support hunters, and the hunters are the ones dumping the money back into the system so we could do management. And so it's, is it the cart or the horse, right? And so we got to think about this. Like, if we want to have more turkey numbers, what are we willing to do at my landowner level? And what are we willing to do to work with my neighbors to solve this issue? And we may not have the best science saying if we do X, it equals Y or Z yet.
Because you don't know.
But if we, that's right. We're talking about, yes, man. It's a landscape level species. We're tracking turkey numbers off of harvest. And so harvest is primarily 2+ year old birds. So we're already 2 years behind when we're ready to make a decision. And that really upsets me. And I'm a biologist, man. I know how it works. But how do we fix those issues? How can we do something today to try to make a difference? And so we're encouraging people like, hey, we may not have the best answer, but if we're not trying, guys, we're dying. And we got to do something.
Yeah. Well, and then the hard part about that, too, is that it's because you have to feed out communications and you have to make people aware of what they can do. And you're telling landowners to change their routine to try to help something. But since by the nature of science, you're going to learn as you go. And so then you're going to come back later. Like, there's going to be a couple things where you're like, okay, we tried this. We didn't see the results we wanted. So now we're going to try this. And just go, but you told me this 2 years ago. You know what I mean? Like that's the headwind that is always like in your role, where things change and we have theories and we put them out and we test them. And when they don't work, we change them. And then
that's right.
But when people hear that, it's sort of like informational whiplash. It's like, but no, you told me to wear blue yesterday. You tell me to wear red today. Why would you do that? and but then that's kind of the constant thing of your role is just keeping that communication alive and keeping people, being as transparent as possible and letting people know that you're working with them and stuff like that. I wanted to ask you, you talked about pressure, and it made me think of another thing is how much, and this is another one where I'm probably going to just absolutely step on a landmine right here, but I'm going to go ahead and do it.
Safety line coming.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna have to throw me a life vest there. Uh, how much does cattle influence when you're talking about pressure? And is that a thing? And like, I know that you can't go into that territory, just as I wouldn't telling anybody running cattle that they shouldn't do a certain thing or not run in a certain area. That's not on the table. But how much does that? How much does, I was going to say that industry, but how much does cattle influence the pressure that turkeys face? And do you see that as playing a role?
I think, on the ag environment in general, there's several things to consider. And so I think what we've seen in ag systems where there's pasture, especially more native pasture, native grass pasture, and where your cattle numbers are not too high. And so you have a really good structure for turkeys. You tend to have more turkeys that want to perhaps nest in those areas. Okay. If it's just a clean pasture where it's being mowed down and you're trying to maximize, your production value, you're typically not going to see turkeys out there dropping a nest. So it's not really having an impact directly, maybe indirectly on habitat, right? But not directly. But areas that are being more well managed for cattle production and habitat as a balance, we're seeing that we are having some nest accidentally bumped over, knocked over, whatever. So there's some of that. I don't think it's a big issue, but you also look in big ag systems where you might have a, 500-acre field of corn planted. People are like, man, it's going to have corn everywhere. Well, technically, it's a monoculture, and because it's sprayed to keep bugs off, et cetera, birds don't really use it at all. And so it doesn't have the understory structure at all. The insects aren't in there for the hens to bring poults into that system. So it's kind of null, And so some of that, I don't think it's as impactful. Some of the latest research that we've seen talking about some nests getting bumped. We saw this actually out of Iowa. We've funded some research up there on nesting birds, and it's pretty interesting. I haven't even put this out publicly yet, but we're about to. But we even saw an incidence of badgers even finding nest, which may not have been well documented. Not to say you need to go out and kill badgers. Don't do that. But some other species that we haven't really talked about that are actually like, boy, these eggs are good, or man, if I find a hen on the nest, they're going to hit it. And so there's a lot of other things and critters out there we haven't thought about that's causing some issues. But I think from a scale overall that, nesting and brood range is a big issue from a habitat standpoint. I don't think it's more ag or pasture. I think it's just we don't have the correct composition at a scale to manage over time. And some people are on leases and things where they can't really manage that. And so what can you do, right? If you can't do that, then maybe trying to do some trapping may be your best option, something you can legally do on a leased property where you may not be able to manage the habitat because it's leased. So I think every landowner is going to have a kind of a different arena of what they can do depending upon their ownership and the opportunity or availability of support to do that too. Because some of this costs time, money, right? I mean, managing habitat's not cheap. I can tell you, I manage a lot of large scale habitat projects, and to get places to where they need to be, it's an investment of time and money. And then you got to manage it and maintain it. And so there's some of that, but there's also, well, could I do this over here and trap some predators this year and run a trap line? And what would that do? Or maybe I'm shooting a few. How could that help? And so intrinsically, I'll tell you, it's going to cost less to trap some predators than it does to do intensive habitat management. I can tell you because I'm the one that's written a ton of contracts and going, man, I'm spending $300 an acre or $700 an acre to do this. And you're definitely not spending that much trapping. So There's things to consider, depending on the size of your property, what you're doing, who you cooperate with to get things done, to hopefully help anyone better manage for the species they want to have on their property at the end of the day.
You know how I know that you've worked with a lot of landowners in your career? Is I just asked you a fully loaded question on do cattle impact turkeys, and you spoke to it as in, yeah, cattle are going to bump them out a little bit because it's cows. They're going to walk around and they're going to inadvertently bump some turkeys, right? Like that's going to happen. But I think someone who's inexperienced with landowners is going to say, yes, cattle will impact turkeys. And it makes your agricultural stewards the bad guy. And that's going to tick them off. They're not going to work with you or try to work with you. But I could tell you've worked with them because it's like, you know what? Yeah, that does. But you know what you can do? And it's more of a I'm gonna work with you instead of against you. And yes, what you do is going to impact turkeys, but you can help them by doing X and O and do this. That's it kind of speaks to your experience there. I noted that was
Well, thank you. Somebody noticed something good about me today. That's good. Maybe more than my wife will say, but no. No, you're right, man. I mean, you work with enough people over time, and there's a livelihood across this nation of what you're doing, whether you're growing trees, growing cattle, growing sheep, doing whatever it is, and so or managing wildlife, and so there's a balance. And the beautiful thing with conservation is it's that balance. It's the balance between people and the environment. That's really the epicormic foundation of conservation, and so what I see is like, well, hey, let's do some rotational grazing. Maybe we're moving cattle off pasture to pasture and we let this one sit for a while, especially if it's adjacent to a good wooded area and we think that it could be beneficial for turkeys. When cattle get in there, they're going to love it, and you're going to protect the turkeys at the same time. So I think there's always a solution for anyone you work with, and you just have to talk to them and meet them where they are and try to help them get to the next level if that's what they want to do. I don't always have the correct answers, and I think I've learned more working with landowners because every landowner may have tried 1,000 different things, and they'll tell you what worked and what didn't work. And so what I've tried to do over time is kind of create that suite of things that I've seen work or didn't work, and then just try to share that with the next person just to try to spread the love, man, because I hate seeing people go through the motions to try to do something and they're doing it wrong or they're wasting a lot of money and time. And I'd like, hey, just hold on a second. Let me help you. Go this way, and it's going to save you a lot of time and effort. And I would rather do that every day of the week.
Yeah. So on that note, for anybody listening, landowner, or there's a lot of people listening to this I know that work with landowners. How can they get a hold of you to get advice on what to do? You do a lot of consultation. You work with a lot of landowners. Talk about really quick, just what can they do to work with you to help boost turkey populations, and what events do you all have coming up?
Sure, absolutely. So go to our website. You can find me or anyone else on there. We have an info button. Send us a request. We will respond to you, and we'll try to give you some help. That's what we're here for. We're in the middle of standing up this year. We're really talking about cooperatives, and these are private landowner cooperatives for the wild turkey, and it's very important. We're taking a means to bring people together to talk about three big things. One is habitat. One is harvest, and that's people harvesting birds. Okay. And the third one is really predator management. And so we're wrapping all that together and trying to do cooperatives with folks. So we're talking about how we're going to do this, how we're rolling this out. And we have some field days coming up that's going to really demonstrate that. We have a big one we're going to do that with Real Tree Farms. They're partnering with us, and we're going to be down at Real Tree Farms on June the 15th, actually. We only have 50 slots available, even some VIP slots. If you want to come in early and wine and dine with some crazies like me and others, people that are much more important than me, right? But get to talk turkey and get to see kind of behind the scenes of Real Tree Farms and the Jordan family. It's a pretty special treat. And we have another field day where we have planned out actually near the coast of South Carolina. We have some guys that have come together. I believe it's on June the 6th. And we're going to do a field day out there. And the same means we're talking about all these things, and people are just wanting to come back and help. We plan on doing more of these, especially associated with our local chapters. It's something that, as we've talked with our people, our grassroots turkey hunters, what do you want with this organization? This is your organization. And by far, it's been very loud, as everyone's talked about. We want to learn more about what we can do to better habitat and what can we do better here on our own dirt for turkeys. And so we're trying to work with any of our local chapters that are evolving across the U.S. to go, hey, we're here to help you. We'll help stand these up. We'll provide the educational material, and we'll help bring people together and make this happen. So check out our website for any of this stuff, turkeysfortomorrow.org. You'll find us. We're on all the social platforms, of course, and come see what we're doing, because we're really trying to make a difference in turkey populations around the U.S.
Anything we didn't cover today that you want to cover?
Hey, if you're not a member, we'd love to have you as a member.
There we go.
I mean, we are a membership organization. And honestly, we never thought we would be, but people just said, hey, we want to be members. So check us out. I will say we have some special things that's going to be going on online. We're going to be selling some product. And we're also going to have really some opportunities for some membership promotions that's going to roll out in June. So stay tuned for that. And then last but not least, since I got a minute on the air, we normally do a summer raffle auction. Okay. And so I have recently worked with some folks, even out of the country, to provide some special opportunities that we're going to roll out that will even be focused in places like Argentina, Uruguay, maybe in some salty water to chase some really cool fish, along with some stuff here in the U.S. And other areas. And so stay tuned. We're going to roll that out June, July, August as auctions and quote unquote raffles, just to try to give back and have some fun, helping people have cool experiences while supporting turkeys.
Gee, thanks, because now my wife's going to be very happy that I'm going to be spending money at a raffle for Argentina, because it's happening.
Fantastic. Honey, thank you.
And wrapping up here, quick tips. You out there that have pasture that you're not utilizing for agriculture, hold off on the mow. My mom listens to the podcast. Mom, maybe don't take the grass down on the acreage right now. Hold off. And maybe you could coordinate a co-op with the acreage around you, because that's there. My mom wants nothing to do with the co-op, though. It's the whole HOA thing, and but maybe if people could hold off on the mow for a little bit, leave one side of the road a little longer, and maybe engage in, I'm going to say, diversify your portfolio of predator management, because usually in cattle areas, it's just the coyotes. There's other things in there that you can help manage. So those three things right there could help boost the populations. And the reason I say that is my mom has a group of like 40 turkeys that they're throwing food in all the time. Go through the property, but they're always kind of sitting on the porch and watching. So those are simple things that Jason has talked about here that you can do that can actually make a difference. And for more information, check out Turkeys for Tomorrow, check out their website, and make sure to throw some money at those raffles, because fishing in Argentina is off the chain.
Yes, it is. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Jason, thank you so much.
Appreciate y'all.
This concludes episode number 94 for the National Land Realty Podcast, discussing turkey populations and actions that you can take to help this game bird, with Jason Lupardus of Turkeys for Tomorrow. You can learn more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com.